If you want to press record.
Yeah, we're recording. It's just going.
Okay, perfect. Okay, everybody. Welcome in. I know we still have some people. I see the number going up, so I know we still have some people going. But as we were just talking about before we got started here in pro sport, we're already late. We're all fined right now if you're joining 5 minutes after. So we'll send you the bill in after the call. So we are really excited today to host this free Lab2Life event with performance nutrition professionals. And we are just really excited for the amazing discussion that's going to follow today. And so what Dana and I wanted to do before we get started is just to tell you a little bit about, if you don't already know the Performance Nutrition Professional organization and what we're about, just to tell you a little bit about who we are and what we do. Dana and I are both sport dietitians for 20 plus years now. And a couple of years ago, we're just talking about kind of the lack of there's kind of an education gap for sport nutrition professionals out in the field that have been doing work a little while. You kind of can go to a conference like ACSM or ASPDA and get, maybe a 1 hour deep dive in a topic lecture. But you're already working in the field and you just don't have time to go back to school. And there's kind of a gap of kind of going deeper a little bit with knowledge sometimes, and kind of getting a little bit in the weeds from an evidence-based perspective. And so that's kind of the overall arching goal of performance nutrition professionals, is to provide you some deep dive learning opportunities, also focusing on being taught by world-leading experts in the field. And so all of our educational initiatives are really targeted at those two things: going deep into the evidence, using the right practitioners. And then our Lab2Life motto is taking that out of the weeds into a practical environment. So you can visit our website to learn a little bit more about what we're doing. Our hallmark course is our Elite Operators course, which is a live in-person event. We host 2 a year. We have an upcoming one at the IMG Academy in November. Check it out on our website. We're about 60% full. We'd love to see you there. And just check out some of our other opportunities as well. We offer a blend of paid for and also free education events that you can access on our website. If you can't stay on today, just know that we will have a recording of this. And our time with our experts is going to be about an hour and a half-ish, maybe a bit shorter. But we will have an open 30-minute conversation with Dana and myself after the discussion is over to kind of do some shop talk with practitioners if you want to stay on as well. So, this is not going to just be a chat about collagen. We're not just going to kind of go through a really didactic deep dive into this area. Part of what we want to do today is really just discuss what the current kind of state of the union kind of is in collagen research and application. And we'll kind of introduce the speakers right away, and then I'll introduce the way we're going to format this discussion today. I really love the way we've framed it. We kind of have the first part, which was just a global discussion about collagen use in sport. The second part of our discussion together, we'll be going through some specific case scenarios to see what yay or nay, or just what the evidence surrounding these applications are. And then we have a fun third part of our discussion, will just be some rapid fire questions with our amazing panel today to kind of go through what's going on in collagen. And so what we'll do first is I'll introduce myself. We're just going to do self-introductions because I hate reading bios off of a paragraph. It's kind of boring. But we'll kind of just go through who our awesome panel is today. So I'm Jen Gibson. I'm just the moderator today. I'm a sport dietitian, 21 years, 10 years in Olympic and 10 years in pro. Most recently, I'm the head sport RD for the Blackhawks. I'm here right now during training camp on an off day, and happy to moderate today. And we'll go to Dana right now. Oh, sorry,
Yeah,
we'll go to Stu. We're going to go to Stu.
Oh, yeah.
My slide says Stu is next.
Stu.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Hi, Stu Phillips. I'm a professor in the Department of Kinesiology. Been here at McMaster coming up to 28 years. I've spent some time working with a few professional teams, but don't really do that much of that anymore because I'm the chair of this department. Just took on that role, and so learning how to balance science with administration. But yeah, thanks for having me on here. Pleasure to be part of this.
All right. Dr. Barr, you have
Yeah,
the floor.
thank you. My name is Keith Barr. I'm a professor here at the University of California, Davis. I've been here about 16 years. Before that, I was at University of Dundee in Scotland. I too am now chair. Mine is the chair of molecular integrative and cellular physiology.
Awesome.
You
And
guys are
Dana.
humble and quick. I'm Dana. I'm Jen's other half of PNP, and I had that photo. I paid a lot of money to get the photographer to make a good photo, and he earned it. Yeah, Jen and I run PNP together, but I'm also a practitioner. I'm the performance nutrition consultant with the Warriors, going on the seventh season. And I know Keith and Stu quite well, just through our careers, and had the great opportunity to postdoc with Keith. He actually put up with me for about 4 years and work on some of the collagen research that we did and some of the nutrition strategy research uh, in humans. So we kind of have a nice flow from the very sort of cellular lab-based work across to humans. And so I've kind of seen both sides of the picture.
Awesome. Well, thanks. I'm really excited to have the group of people we do today and staying true to kind of how we commit to our education initiatives. We pretty much have the best in the business on this discussion today. And so what we'll do, just to kind of start off, and I'll moderate and kind of mediate if I need to, the kind of discussion to ensure that we can kind of stay on time and kind of just keep the organic discussion going. But the first part that we are going to kind of discuss, and maybe what I'll do is just kind of go in that same order we just did right now, or we can just kind of all organically jump in. But basically, we want to just, the first question that we're going to kind of ask is just a global discussion. Should we be supplementing with collagen to support connective tissue and health function? And maybe just what would be really helpful for this part one is looking at your own area of expertise. Talk a little bit about how collagen research has evolved, what we kind of know for sure. Do we know anything for sure? What are limitations? And how has this kind of body of research evolved and shaped current positions? And so it's kind of just a global discussion of just like collagen research to date, from your lens and kind of what you kind of know and what you glean from that. And so we'll just start off with kind of just a global discussion from each person's perspective. Does anyone want to go first, or I'll just kind of go?
I would love to go first.
Okay, you go ahead.
I think it would be
Go
great
ahead.
to kind of get the practitioner end and like the practitioner lens of where we've seen collagen evolve in from sort of into practice, in and out. So as a practitioner, I was really excited around like 2016 when Jen was telling, it was actually Jen who was like, yeah, these guys are doing Jello shots in the NFL. And that was around the same time that the gelatin study that Keith ran with Greg Shaw.
Great.
Greg Slater, Shaw, one of them.
Greg Shaw.
Shaw, thank you. Where they ran just a gelatin dosing study, and that got a lot of coverage because it was kind of the first study in this area, and it was something new in sport nutrition that we don't really get something really new often. I think we reiterate and we learn and we try to understand a new supplement or a new strategy more and more and more and revise it, but something completely kind of new, and in athletes. So, I think that the study was really small, and we can talk about, some of the details with the research, but that definitely sparked a lot of people going to the bakery aisle and buying gelatin off shelves and making Jello and realizing they needed to eat a whole tray of Jello to get what we thought was a good dose. That's since evolved to looking at different forms of collagen and understanding, where collagen comes from, what amino acids make up this supplement, and what types of collagen, peptides, hydrolyzed collagen, and then what's better, collagen peptides or gelatin. obviously everyone's kind of started going with collagen because the huge influx in the industry. And I'd say there was definitely a point in time, just based on some of the initial kind of preliminary research of having a good collagen loading protocol with nutrition in your practice, and doing like a 20-gram dose an hour before loading. And I think that now, with more sort of research coming out, people are now, I think practitioners are now like, nope, I'm not doing it anymore. There's too much like, I'm not sure. There's too much confusion in, does it work? Does it not? So I think we're at a point now where we we're not sure what we should do or what the best method is. And that's what we're trying to help people understand, is what is the evidence? Is it robust enough for me to use in various situations or no? And I think the one thing that I really, learned working in the lab and through my PhD was understanding the research and really understanding the physiology of connective tissue, and being able to take that into practice and make decisions based on nutritional physiology. So not necessarily waiting for the super meta-analysis to come out, but being able to kind of work at the leading edge, but with, sort of that critical thinking skill set. And so I know that Keith has been continued to work in this space with Luke in the Netherlands, and Stu's protein metabolism expertise is obviously world class. And we know that collagen is not a complete amino acid, does not have a complete amino acid profile. So we'll let Stu and Keith share their opinions, but I think that we're at a point.
That was a really good summary of kind of the
there we
practitioner
go.
world. Yeah. No, I mean, and I think this is kind of looking at it from a 50,000-foot view, and what's kind of been the climate as a practitioner. It's like, and I was one of those people going and buying my gelatin, and so we've kind of come along the spectrum here, and we were taking showers in it at some point in time, and now all of a sudden everyone's like, oh, I don't know if we need this. And so from a practitioner perspective, there has been this kind of fast and hard dating cycle, and now we're not sure if we're separating or divorcing or what we're doing with our relationship. So that was actually a really nice summary. So let's talk a little bit about from the research perspective. Keith, let's have you just unmute and talk a little bit about that evolution over the last, let's say, I want to say about 15 years or so.
Sure. So it's probably more like just the edge of 10 years.
10, okay. Yeah. I'm old.
Because we were doing the work that we did with Greg Shaw at AIS was just under 15 years, or just under 10 years ago.
Okay.
And so the problem is that because we're in an environment where any kind of finding suddenly creates this huge business opportunity, and there was the fastest growing supplement in the world was collagen, that lots of things would come out on both sides of the argument. The other thing that's really important to know is that traditionally, when we do an exercise study, it's really, we can look in the first 5 to 6 hours after exercise and see whether that nutrition has had an effect. And you can take the biopsies and you can look and you can say, oh, yeah, it's had an effect. Michael Kerr did research a number of years ago now that kind of showed that for connective tissue, the peaks happen about 24 to 48 hours after a bout of exercise. And so if you're doing an intense bout of exercise, and we actually see the same thing, we were pretty surprised. We do these dose responses in cell culture in the laboratory, and we do, a timeline of here's an hour and a half, 3 hours, 6 hours, 12, and 24. And then collagen synthesis actually goes down and then back up after we feed the cells. And so it does look like we're looking at something entirely different than what we've been looking at. And so that's a lot of why we get a lot of contrasting data in this area. Because when I'm talking about muscle protein synthesis, that's within the cell, you make protein, it gets incorporated into the myofibrillar array really, really quickly. When we're talking about extracellular matrix, what you have to do is you have to synthesize that within the cell. And then really, really important is that protein doesn't get out of the cell unless there is vitamin C in the area. And a lot of times we say that, oh, the person has enough vitamin C in their general diet. But as we all know from being nutritionists, if we have a swimmer, they have a specific shape, largely because blood flow is taking most of the nutrients to those muscles that they work. So they have big lats, no traps, and they look like they left the hanger in their shirt. The reason that they have that shape is because the exercise is delivering the nutrients to a large degree. So if we just generally are taking vitamin C based foods through the day, and Dana can tell you this because she left the vitamin C in the sunshine for one of our
No, I
experiments.
heated it. I heated it.
Yeah, and
Killed it.
we didn't get any effect on collagen synthesis. So that was the number one thing for us to say that yeah, there's something real here because we can screw it up. And so for us that was like the best internal control because we did a whole study and found that nothing increased collagen synthesis because we left the vitamin C out. So that's really important because when we're doing muscle protein synthesis, you don't need the vitamin C. So most of the leucine-rich protein experiments are done just as the protein itself. And so in that situation, if you're then going to isolate the extracellular matrix fraction, there shouldn't be actually an increase in extracellular matrix based collagen based on the nutrition because there isn't that secondary stimulus that you need in order to export the new collagen that you've made. So we've done a number of different things recently that make me feel much more comfortable about the effect that there is a small but significant effect of the collagen. And probably the best one is a study that we finished not too long ago where we did collagen from hydrolyzed collagen. We then used a product which is a recombinant collagen that's made in bacterial cells. And that was really important for us because they don't have the hydroxylation enzyme. So you can't get hydroxyproline and hydroxylysine that we thought were going to be important for collagen synthesis. And then we not only compared those two, we had a maltodextrin control, and most importantly, we had a whey protein control. All of them had the same amount of collagen. We gave them to people 3 times. We had them do 3 bouts of exercise, and we looked at kind of those blood markers that are horrible markers of P1NP, of horrible markers of collagen synthesis, but we did a lot of internal controls as far as to make sure that our measurement was accurate and reliable. And so what we found was about a 30% increase with both of the collagens. There was no change with whey or maltodextrin. And so that's telling us that we think that there is something about supplying these extra nutrients that are going to be important for, in that case, overall whole body collagen synthesis. And then when you deliver them, and a lot of the studies that we're doing that are short term, they use a really high dose. And when you can go in the short term, like Rob Erskine's studies, where he looks at 30 grams of collagen versus 15 versus a control, he sees that he can get a bigger patellar tendon with 30 grams of collagen supplementation when you do strength training over about an 8 to 12 week period. If we're going to go for a longer time frame, we don't quite need that 30 grams. And so there is building evidence, especially in the functional components, that there is some advantage to taking collagen on kind of reactive strength or stiffness components within the structures.
Just one thing I wanted to clarify, sort of extracellular matrix.
Yeah.
So the samples that Keith is talking about is like a biopsy sample, and then and correct me if I'm wrong, Keith. And then what they did was they were able to separate out the sort of tissue that is sort of muscle fiber tissue, and then the connective tissue or extracellular matrix, so the proteoglycans. And so we were kind of separate out the connective tissue and the muscle tissue, and then measure. That was on the biopsy studies. Am I correct there? So you're
Yep.
pulling out the collagen from the biopsy.
Yeah, so Stu can talk about the fractionation much better,
Correct.
but basically you fractionate the cytoplasmic proteins from within the muscle cells.
Mhm.
You then have the myofibrillar proteins, the myosin and actin, and all of the things associated with contraction. And then you get this matrix-based protein, which is about 2% of a muscle. And within that, the work that we were doing with Luke was showing that maybe about 5% of that 2% was actually collagen. So there's a very small fraction there of collagen within the muscle. And again, it wasn't until Torben Oskar's work with the blended protein, where we use both both a high quality protein and whey, together with a little bit of a small amount of hydrolyzed collagen, about 5 grams, nobody had ever really seen increases, nutritionally based increases in that extracellular matrix fraction over about that first 5 to 6 hours. And so Torben showed that when you had that high amount of whey protein and collagen together, there was no decrease in glycine within the circulation, and that you saw an increase in a nutritionally based increase in the connective tissue and collagen content.
Stu, did you want to add some more color there?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think when we first set this up, I said, well, I don't do work in this area nowhere near as much as Keith. And Keith and I have chatted several times, and the analogies between muscle protein synthesis and tendon or connective tissue protein synthesis, there's some notable differences. The biggest thing I think is that connective tissue is far less vascularized than muscle tissue. So timing of the delivery of collagen, if it is to be incorporated, would probably be much more important, maybe even pre-exercise. But the one thing that I think both of us do agree on is that these are both mechanically sensitive tissues. And my gradual realization, and it's hard for a guy who's worked in protein for 30 years to admit, but based on evidence, is that the effect of protein per se on what you gain in muscle is small. And when I say small to the extent that actually you need thousands of people to detect the effects statistically. And so it's this real thin layer on top. And I think, and I don't want to misspeak on Keith's behalf, he would sort of say the same thing. So the mechanical tension sets the stage for the possibility that collagen, or in the case of muscle protein, could do something. I mean, based on the original Shaw paper, which generated a lot of excitement, and deservedly so, very exciting. The claims and things then that happened in the wake of that were, at least in my opinion, way out of proportion with what the paper showed, right? So I pointed out, with all of the whole body marker data, you don't know where that's coming from. So one of the biggest stores of collagen in the body is bone. And when you skip rope and you jump up and down, you're probably turning on bone collagen synthesis. So, there's a line for me where I sort of say, you know what, there's maybe something going on. I'm not sure it's as big a deal. Rewind my career 15, 20 years, and I would have told you that protein was a key element to gaining muscle. Now I'm like, it's important if you care about the thin layer of icing that's on the cake. And I'll be honest with you, that at the same time, there was a series of studies that came out from a group in Germany, sponsored by an institute in Kiel, that was a collagen institute, that had the look of being academic in nature, that were consistently positive, like ridiculously consistently positive, and had huge effects for collagen supplementation on muscle that were, I mean, I'll just call them implausible, which, I've been doing this for long enough that I just get really jaded when those things begin to come up and then people are making claims about collagen. And I, probably adopted a much more jaded attitude than I needed to, but it was influenced largely by, I mean, somebody asked if you're opposed to providing the citations, and I have no issue putting them all in there. It would be the scientific equivalent, at least in my mind, with the degree of like consistently positive collagen results of like buying the winning lottery ticket like several times. You know, things work in science a lot of times, but things don't work as well. And these guys just kept turning up what I would call crackerjack results, that you know, really sort of made me go, like, this is just not possible. But you know, I can so I'll throw them in the chat. You can read them. You can read our letters to the editor over the papers itself as well. So without reply, I hasten to add. So you know, I mean, just some. I'll say what I is some healthy skepticism maybe on the process, but you know, this is a nuanced discussion. I think there are probably times and avenues, and you know, Keith just spoke about a really important study that I don't think it's not out yet, is it, Keith? I know you've talked about it before, but I don't think it's out. Is and you know, a part of the proxies that are always used as a sign of collagen ingestion are hydroxyproline, hydroxylysine, and everybody goes, "Oh, look, these amino acids," and I'm like, they can't be charged to a tRNA and reused. All they are is a proxy marker showing that you ate collagen and it's appearing in circulation. So, and people go, "Oh, but they're special." And I'm like, what do they do? How are they special? But maybe they're signaling. I don't know. But yeah, so I'll just leave it there and say that my skepticism is probably earned more on looking at muscle data than it is on tendon data. But I have a list of questions, and I'm sure that Dana, you would probably say the same things to your pro athletes when you put to somebody, it's low risk, maybe high reward. Would you take it? And you know, to me, there's a list of questions that I would always ask an athlete or ask the athletes. Every athlete has a guy, right? You know, my guy, or your nutritionist, hopefully, or your trainer, you would think, but really it's, well, I got to talk to my guy. And, you know, I just say, you know, these are the questions I have them ask.
Well, I think what's been really nice about this kind of collegial discussion here is that there's a few things going on. You know, you have, like you were saying, Keith, this kind of tsunami of industry adoption as well that kind of paralleled that study. And I think you know, you have the practitioner, and interestingly enough, there's practitioners that probably never even heard of the Shaw study because they're new. You know, the field of sport dietitians there's a big swell of young practitioners, and they may have just walked into their, you know, college supplement closet, and there's collagen there, and they're just like, okay, we just use this, you know. And so I think it's important to tease out some of the nuance, because I do feel like, and we're going to go in part 2 through these kind of different case scenarios, but I think sometimes there's this kind of global halo around what it helps with, and it's like it helps with everything. And so I think what we'll do now is in part 2 is we'll kind of start to go, okay, the first part was, we called it the lab section. Let's talk a little bit about the research, state of the research, where we're at. And then in part 2 here, if my computer wants to advance, we'll talk a little bit about the life section of collagen, and talking a little bit about on the ground usage. And what we've done is through kind of polling some of our practitioners that we've had come through our Elite Ops courses that are kind of part of our group. We kind of started to say, okay, what are some of the collagen related questions and cases that matter most to you in the daily training environment? What are the things you encounter daily? And then we'll kind of just ask each question. And then we just like the panel to just talk about, you know, is there evidence from that? Are we still doing this? You know, from the science and then the practice standpoint. And then when you're in that scenario, what are the other factors you're also thinking about when making decisions for that specific situation? And so I like to kind of call this one probably the most globally, you know, represented application of collagen. And on purpose, you know, I just kind of wrote like overall just tendon health, whatever that means. But, you know, is there, you know, let's talk a little bit about the research and influence around daily collagen supplementation for just overall tendon health and support, almost like a multivitamin for your tendon. Let's just call it that. And then our next two cases, we'll get through some specific injury type and overuse and REDS. We'll go into a few different ones. But let's talk a little bit about practically and evidence-based application of this as a daily, let's just call it a daily multivitamin. We're throwing this in the mix of our athletes' bodies every single day. Generally speaking, it's a 10 to 20 gram hydrolyzed collagen dose with vitamin C. And maybe you're doing it pre-exercise. So I'll try to, Dana, do you want to start? And then we'll kind of,
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. And I think obviously, like, I was in this research space for a while. So, being involved in some of the preliminary sort of research and just sort of lab meetings around some of the cell research and engineered ligament research, I really am able to come at it from understanding the physiology of the sport. And I work in the NBA, and with these athletes, the injuries that are most frequent are connective tissue. Ankles are the sort of most frequent, but sort of patellar tendinopathies, and like it's just more the soft tissue or connective tissue injuries that are a massive priority in terms of nutrition. Like, it's like injury. We're trying to do everything we can with giant humans. They're big humans like this. So I think one of the things I consider is the nutrition that an NBA player needs. We don't really have like really good data on their energy, on actual measured energy expenditure, um, on the sort of unique physiologies of NBA players. And so when I look at, the risk versus reward, and I also look at this things like, well, you kind of want to be innovative to keep your job, especially like as a consultant. You need to be kind of thinking ahead and really taking a sort of approach that's a little bit forward thinking, and being able to rationalize that through understanding what the training is doing, what your high performance director prioritizes. So in this space, tendon and connective tissue health is a massive priority. And our players, given their schedules, are all over the place. We have an amazing culinary team. Everything is really, really well managed, but we're trying to do everything we can to reduce risk of injury and help promote connective tissue health. So in this space, I do work to create sort of different protocols for different sort of scenarios of players. So I wouldn't say we do this protocol anymore, but we've evolved it to actually more and with whey. So we can talk a little bit more about like what that looks like in dosing and stuff, but following kind of where some of the research has gone. And then maybe Keith or Stu, if you, yeah, I would love to hear sort of where you guys have gone with the research and how that's influenced what's going on in practice.
From a daily use perspective, yeah. From the practitioner levels, like, do I use this every day? Yes, no, maybe. How?
Yes.
Yeah.
So if I can go in there, I think the key thing is the thing that Stu said, is that if you get the load wrong, you could put gold inside of them and it's not going to do a damn bit of good for them. So I sat, when I write grants, I eat this massive amount of protein and somehow I don't end up with huge muscles. We all know that the load is the number one thing that happens. And the biggest problem with, especially in the NBA, is we get the load wrong. We load for muscle, we load for skill. So if I'm an NBA basketball player, I got to put up 1,000 shots a day. And if I'm doing that, that's 1,000 small jumps that is going to give me small amount of load on my Achilles. And that's going to turn over, that's going to have a big kind of signal for breakdown. We only have a small signal from that load to stimulate synthesis. And the biggest problem that we have is there's two real things, and this is, I think, really important for everybody, even if we're not in a medical-based understanding here. There's two reasons that we're going to rupture a tendon. One is that it becomes small and brittle. And this, by small and brittle, that means that there's less collagen and there's lots of cross-linking. This is the type of thing that happens when you sit on your couch. You're still eating what you were you're not doing any exercise. And we've got really nice data. We will immobilize an animal for 3 days. We lose 15% of the collagen within that tendon. So we can shrink that tendon super duper fast. All right. And that's just collagen turnover rate. So that tendon is smaller, but it's now got more of the crosslinks between the collagen molecules. So it's small and it's brittle. The other thing that does this is high levels of testosterone. So if you ever watched the Major League Baseball in the 1990s, there were all these guys jacking up lots of performance-enhancing drugs, and statisticians can actually go back in and without looking at the physiology, they can tell you without fail who is taking the drugs, because what happens is their performance goes up and then it suddenly goes down and it doesn't come back, because basically what testosterone does is it activates this enzyme lysyl oxidase that cross-links the collagen. It makes it stiff, but it also decreases the accumulation of collagen. So we actually get into a brittle tendon phenotype there. And so we get tendon ruptures then. The other reason that we get tendon ruptures is kind of what we saw in the NBA this year. And that's when we've got a good amount of collagen, but it's not cross-linked, it's not stiff. And the reason for that is when we have a lot of breakdown stimulus, a lot of catabolic stimulus, unlike muscle, when we break down, we build and we make the same muscle, our extracellular matrix, it's really important that you've got all of these crosslinks. And if I am breaking it down really quickly and I'm turning it over and I'm adding new collagen, what I'm doing is I'm diluting out the crosslinks. And we get something that has more collagen but less stiffness in it. And so there's actually a study in the G League players looking at their Achilles tendon, and their Achilles tendon stiffness goes down through the season. And part of that is because of this high rate of turnover. And that's different than what we want for muscle, which is we like turnover because it gives us higher quality muscle a lot of times. So when we're doing this, what we're trying to do is we're trying to get the load right. And so for athletes who need to train for long periods of time, that's going to be great for heart, skeletal muscle, all of these things. We need to actually get a second session in there that's really focused on the tendon or on the connective tissue, or we're going to just get these types of injuries that we're seeing in NBA and NFL, in all of these sports happening more and more. And so what we do is we take that session and then we use our nutrition around that session. So we're not necessarily targeting the main session that's going to be like a 2-hour walkthrough with a lot of movement, because that's not necessarily what we're going to work on. That has to happen for the sport. That has to happen for your skill. We're going to do at least 3 times a week, try and get in a session that's really focused on, we're going to load for your connective tissues. And then we can do something like this. It wouldn't be exactly this, as Dana said. We would use it as a blend more. And the reason that we use the blend is that the reason that leucine-rich protein works well is it can activate these signaling molecules within our cells. And that's true in skeletal muscle, that leucine can activate mTOR complex 1 in skeletal muscle, but it also does it in connective tissue. And we've shown that if we block mTOR in connective tissue, we get smaller tissues that are not as functional. So that the leucine is going to be a signal as well. And if we provide the whey and the leucine together with some nutritional things like vitamin C, we can get that where we want it, and we can get the positive response within the tissue that we're looking for. And there, if we maximize kind of the anabolics of the training session so that it's really focused on the connective tissue, then we can get something that's going to be more protective than what you get just by throwing it into your training, because that's going to do a small amount, but it's not necessarily going to do enough.
So understanding the loading patterns of your sport and of the athletes you're working with is a priority for us as nutritionists. Would you agree?
It's absolutely essential. And so we get this. So one of the hardest teams that I've worked with is the Chinese table tennis team, because they load for 8 hours a day and they do small jumps for 8 hours a day. And it's one person playing against 2 people. So it's like, it's unbelievable the volume of load. It's not like they're not jumping to dunk. They're not doing like these massive jumps, but it's small jumps for 8 hours. And that's horrible for the connective tissue. And so these people have massive tendinopathies, and you can get all of these issues. And so if that's your sport, now you got to really think about what you're doing, because no matter what you do for them, it's not really going to be perfect. And so again, if that's your sport, or if you just have, say, a weekend warrior where or a normal person who's just training maybe 30 minutes a day, that's fine. You can do it with your sport. But if you're working on these sports where there's huge amounts of load, lots of walkthroughs, lots of other stuff, that's going to be a bigger issue than getting the nutrition exactly right.
Could I ask a question, Keith? And I may be misremembering when you and I were speaking in the symposium in Germany, and you made a statement, and I don't know if I remember correctly, that so these high load or high volume sessions that are happening, like so muscle will sort of keep, will become anabolically sensitive even if you keep loading it, loading it, loading it. I mean, there might be a turning off point, but tendon stops, right? Like that anabolic activation happens and then it effectively just shuts down. So is that what's happening in these long training sessions? And so you're not,
Exactly.
even if you provide the nutrition, you're not doing anything good for the tendon. I mean, I
Yeah.
think the assumption that a lot of people are making, through years of listening to me, Luke, Phil Atherton, is saying, oh, well, you exercise the tissue, it becomes anabolically sensitive. We've got increased perfusion and you deliver the substrate and, it's awesome. Like everything remodels itself and repairs itself, but the tendon's not doing that, right? It's essentially that anabolic process is switched off. Their perfusion is nowhere near as good as a muscle. And so now, even if you threw in, like super collagen and vitamin C, it actually doesn't do anything.
It's not enough. Yeah. So the same thing is true for bone. The same thing is true for cartilage.
Yeah.
Bone, it's as little as 40 loads. So by 40 loads,
Yeah.
there's no additional benefit to doing 140, 400, whatever. It's by the end of those
Yeah.
40 loads, that's your signal. And so so these tissues are very different in how they respond to load.
So is your suggestion then that there's another session that's specific to the tendon? And like, in other words, and again, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but, tendon and bone, they tend to, bone likes these sort of intermittent kind of bouncing. And as you said, maybe 40 jumps and that's it. But tendon tends to like sort of eccentric, like heavy eccentric overload, right? Is that something that you would recommend? Would it be separate from all of the stuff that they've done during the day, or would it be on another day, or have I got that wrong?
So what we do is if you're loading, if your main training session is say 2 o'clock in the afternoon, we're going to go say 6 to 8 hours before then. We're going to get a stimulus. And the reason we go that long is because, again, it takes a while for the tendons to get that responsiveness back. And so what we do is we'll do a variety of different loads. If it's a healthy athlete, we can do just some jumping and other things. But if it's somebody who has a tendinopathy, in order to get load through the injured part, we have to do very specific loads, which are low intensity, but long duration isometric holds. And those are really, really good for getting, so our NBA players, they'll do these low intensity, long duration isometric holds that last about 30 seconds. And we've been able to fill in holes within the patellar tendon because like 75% of the people who play professional basketball, if you image their knee, you will see a small hole in their patellar tendon, and that's just jumper's knee. And that's how prevalent it is because of just the demands of the sport. But we can reverse that fairly well, and we can regenerate that tissue pretty completely using these long duration, low intensity isometrics.
Excellent. Thank you.
That's this has been like just right here. I'm like, this is just really challenging the practitioners. Something Dana and I really try to push in our education, especially in the Elite Ops course, is this education of our practitioners around exercise physiology and being able to characterize the activity that's being prescribed to your athletes and understanding what that is and what it does to the body. And so this helps to kind of further our educational mission we've been on for the last few years now, around understanding the impact of the training bout, the type of training bout, and understanding the physiology of that training bout on the athlete. So this fits perfectly with that. And then also Mary's, coming from the pro football world, like, I want to go send this to some of my football coaches because they're going to be like, what's that? We should do another session. So no, that's really awesome. Thank you guys. I'm gonna flip over to the next scenario here, which is this return to play situation. So a performance intervention from an injury or a surgery so for example, like an ACL reconstruction, some sort of injury to tendon. And so can we just talk a little bit about practical application gleaned from the literature? Is this does dosing change? Does timing change? Do we start something pre-surgery? Is there maybe are we supposed to wait for a certain amount of time after the kind of pro-inflammatory phase after surgery? Tell us a little bit about what's going on in that kind of return to play environment immediately post-surgery and then through that rehab process. Dana, did you want to just start?
Yeah, I can chat about that first, just kind of from the practitioner perspective. When I sort of look at surgery or preparing for surgery, I get if I'm working with the sort of general public or I have friends that are going in for surgery, I get sometimes really frustrated at the lack of or the non-existent nutrition support that people get when they're going into surgery. Sometimes they actually do, and the healthcare system up in the mountains, they do. But if I'm looking at, okay, really preparing for surgery, and then post-surgery, there is some research that looks at periods of stress in the body, so pregnancy, post-surgery, where glycine needs go up because you're having to make more tissue, grow tissue, expand it. So there is some evidence showing that in these other conditions, other sort of, it's not in athlete populations, but in non-athlete populations from some clinical research that glycine needs go up. Some papers suggest become conditionally essential in these periods of high stress. So within a sort of player return to play, such as an ACL reconstruction, I would definitely try to understand an athlete's, total energy needs for periods post-surgery for sort of the RTP phases. And if I'm trying to maximize sort of their RTP, then I would look at sort of multiple dosing of collagen integrated into their total nutrition. So yeah, I think that it's something I would do in my population, probably pretty aggressively. But that's partly, yeah, my bias and also budget is huge, so we have that flexibility.
Are you willing to share kind of
Mm,
your dosing? Like, I mean,
yeah,
what kind of grams are we talking about here?
yeah. I mean, for like a post-surgery, I would try like, and it really depends on kind of what their nutrition is. Um, but I would probably dose two times a day, maybe three. But I might dose a little bit lower depending on their sort of body weight. It's kind of like this art and science of getting their nutrition and then kind of estimating what you think would be a good dose based on what we know. But yeah, post-surgery, I'm like, we want to kind of maximize tissue synthesis. And if, the demand for glycine and other amino acids is increased, I would dose 2 to 3 times a day with like the whey collagen blend. So like 20 grams of whey, 10 collagen, or maybe like 30 and 20 for a really big player. But somewhere between there, just yeah, within sort of calculating energy needs and increased needs with tissue repair. And
Keith,
that's
do you want
some
to jump
piece of
in?
work.
Yeah, sure. So again, when we're doing stuff that's return to play, and this is what most practitioners are having to deal with, because as Dana said, most of the injuries that we're getting are musculoskeletal. So we're getting muscle pulls, we're getting tendon, we're getting interfaces, we're getting ACLs, all of these things, especially if we're looking in women's athletics. And the injury rate is different in women's athletics, and that's largely because of what we're talking about. So one of the things that people really need to understand is that one of the reasons that we get these differences in injury rates, so women are 4 to 9 times more likely to suffer an ACL playing the same sport, but they're also 70% less likely to get a muscle pull. So muscle pulls happen when the tendon is stiffer than the muscle is strong. So when we're not getting a muscle pull, that's because our tendon isn't as stiff. We're getting more ACL ruptures because the knee joint is more lax, and at the luteal surge, where estrogen levels go up, you see an actual increase in knee laxity. Schultz has shown that beautifully, where she pulls on the knees of men versus women, and the women at kind of day 13 of the cycle, bang, it's now moving a whole millimeter more. And so that's pretty big when it's only moving about 4 to 5 millimeters to begin with. And that's one of the big reasons why we're seeing that increase in ACL ruptures in women's athletes. So already we're thinking of, can there be some nutritional things that we can do if I'm working with women's athletes? Because there, what maybe I'm going to do is I'm going to be supplementing with things that are maybe copper-rich foods, like getting some foods, either seafood based or some small sesame seeds or other seeds that are rich in copper, because lysyl oxidase is a copper dependent enzyme, and so to try and maximize the activity there. But it also tells us, again, we have to understand the loading. When we do return to play, as far as the nutritional components, the SMEAT study that you have kind of listed down there that says that the turnover rate is pretty high in these tissues, that's great. And that is true. That study was using phenylalanine. There's a follow-up study that's going to use deuterated water that's probably going to have a slightly different take on it. But basically what it's telling us is that these tissues do turn over pretty quickly. Our study that I did while I was with Luke is on the hamstring tendon, supplementing with collagen for 7 days. When people are getting, right before they get an ACL reconstruction using that hamstring tendon, we get what's left over to see what kind of protein turnover there's been. So there's going to be some work coming here. The biggest thing that we can do in the post-surgical aspect is, again, it's right around the load. So Dana's right that there are changes in the nutritional need for healing. But one of the big things is, if we're going to immobilize the structure, again, that's not going to get to where we necessarily need it to get to, and it's not necessarily going to allow us to return to play faster. We actually start loading people on the day of surgery or the day after surgery, whether it's an ACL, whether it's an Achilles tendon rupture, a patellar tendon, quad tendon, whatever it is. We just use very low jerk isometrics as a way to get small amounts of load through there, so that now we can use that as a way to get the nutrition targeted a little bit better. And we can do those other things, but it's a short period. And then if you do need to be immobilized, you can go back into that. But you're doing that at least twice a day when you've got an individual who's got a significant connective tissue based injury. All of those things are really important. Classically, what we say is this ACL, as it goes through reconstruction, it's going to go through this part where it's going to get less lax. We call that ligamentization, as if it's just that it's becoming a ligament. It has nothing to do with it becoming a ligament. It has to do with the fact that we've immobilized it for so long that the tissue quality is really, really poor. And so if you load it earlier, you don't go through that dramatic decrease in functionality. The tendon that you put in for the ACL is actually significantly stiffer than the native ACL is. So it shouldn't actually, it should actually, and most of the surgeons are very strict about how lax they want it to be. And they just don't want to get too much load through it, because they're worried something's going to happen in there. It doesn't tend to happen if you do the loading right. And by doing the loading right, I mean, applying the load very slowly over time, 3 to 5 seconds, and then letting it off very slowly over 3 to 5 seconds, because the jerk is very low, and that allows you to get load very safely through a damaged tissue. But then adding the nutrients are going to potentially give you something else. But again, as we've been saying all along, that's going to be secondary to the loading component.
This is great. I love it. Stu, anything to add before we flip to our next one?
Yeah, I'm just looking at a couple of questions. I
Sure.
flagged them for Keith in the Q&A, and one was around the timing. Is all of this, Keith, still, I mean, are we still talking about conditioning, loading, or pre-onboarding the nutrition prior to initiating these isometric sessions?
That's the ideal. There are
Okay.
now at least a few studies, a handful of studies where you give them to sedentary people. And you still do see, like there's a study from Moringa out of Japan where they gave 10 grams to completely sedentary people. Achilles tendon stiffness went up without a change in strength or muscle mass, as you would expect. And so you can still get functional changes if you're not doing it around exercise. So we do still say that probably about 80% of the effect is just getting the nutrition in there. And then the extra 20% is getting it timed perfectly. So if you're an early morning runner who can't get up an hour before, but you want to, that's fine. We're just still going to do that load. It's better to do that load than not do the load. And because I can't get the nutrition perfect, I'm not going to. No, we're going to still do our training, and then we're just going to give it with maybe a little bit more whey protein, because that'll give us a little bit of an extra bit that goes to both the muscle as well as the connective tissue.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of what Dana's study showed as well when she was working with our football team here, is we were giving them collagen or a placebo. They were all taking their muscle milk that they got as their, because that was the sponsored group. So they were drinking their muscle milk, and they were coming over to Dana, and she was giving them collagen, or she was giving them a placebo. We still saw a significant improvement in some of the functional measures, like their counter movement jump, like the stiffness components and all of these. We didn't see a change in strength or any of or maximal isometric torque or strength. But what we did see was we saw rate of force development was maintained, and some of the counter movement jump stuff was better. So we do see kind of it's more happening at the stiffness component in these short-term studies. Longer term, we expect to see changes in size and mechanics of the tissues. But that was given after their training, just because it was easier for us to do it that way.
All right. Thank you.
Okay, so we might kind of be saying the same thing with this question, but it's kind of, is there anything more to add for this situation? So it's kind of an athlete, it's not necessarily you're in that acute injury phase, but they basically have this kind of history of overuse related tendinopathy. I know this is your world, Dana, a lot. And they kind of have, this reoccurrent flare-ups, and so talking a little bit about this kind of injury prevention strategy. And so we might have already answered this, but I don't know if anyone wants to we're kind of going through some of the nuances of, okay, every day, post-surgery, and then now just you've got this kind of injury prone, let's just say, type of athlete that you're trying to maintain their performance through it.
So the big difference here, and let me just start before you go, Dana,
Sure, yeah, go ahead.
is that the structure here, there's a really important difference, and that's that part of the structure is still functional. And so most of our training that we do when we're running, jumping, playing, practicing on field, that's going to go through that functional part of the tissue. And the problem with a tendinopathy is that there's a small scarred tissue. It is functionally weaker. And so if I have a little thread and I pull it, it's going to break. But if I take a little thread and I take a little wire that's the same length and I pull it the same way, it's not, the thread's not going to break now, because all the load goes through the wire. And that's called stress shielding. And that's what we normally see in these tissues. And so again, if we don't get load through the tendinopathic part, it doesn't matter. There's already high collagen synthesis in a tendinopathy. but it's not giving us directional collagen. It's not giving us exactly what we need in order to regenerate that tendon. And so again, getting the load there is far more important. And the way that you get the load there is by pulling on it, holding it, and over time, the healthy part starts to relax and the injured part becomes stiffer than the healthy part. And so it gets the tensional load. So if I hold a contraction, if I do an isometric contraction, and I hold it for 30 seconds, at the beginning, all of it. So the example I always give, well, it's if Stu and I are pulling on a tug of war, Stu's stronger than me, so he's most of the load's gonna go through him on the rope. But as he starts to tire, now I'm gonna feel more load on the rope because now I have to pull more in order to have our team not fly through the mud and get and lose the tug of war, and that's not going to happen for Stu and I. We're both extremely competitive. So basically what's going to happen is as he tires, now more load goes to me. And that's really what we're doing when we do these tendinopathic regenerative sessions. And then getting nutrition is fine because now the cells have the right signal so that they can produce parallel oriented collagen. Because in the problem that Dana has is she's got her players are going out, they're doing their 2-hour practice. All that load's going through the healthy part. None of it's going through the tendinopathic part. So if you gave good nutrition, just made the healthy part stronger. And while I'm training, that's great because it's protecting the tissue from injury, but it's not fixing the tissue. And then when you go to a period where they don't train anymore, now it's going to shrink back down and it's going to flare again. And so what we have to do is we take advantage of the training, and then that part that's tendinopathic the cells haven't gotten a signal. So after training, I've already tired out the strong part. So now I'm going to do my isometric holds then, and now it's easier for me to get load through the injured part. And so that's going to give me much more than just adding a nutritional component to it.
I think
The
it's
load.
also important to just point out that, like, sometimes just looking at it from a really practitioner on the ground level and especially through the eyes of our coaches, is in their mind, this athlete is fine. They're back. They have this history, but it's just like, it's the robot mode. Like, okay, is he available? Is he good? Okay, yeah. But the, that kind of predisposition or having this tendinopathy that they're dealing with doesn't even circulate through their mind that that's actually still something to be concerned about. They're just concerned with them getting back out there. And I think also for practitioners, you especially when you're in these big rosters and it's like cleared, who's cleared, who do I have available? You might take, somebody like this, and in your mind practically might say, oh, they're just a full go guy. Like he's in my other batch. He's in my non-medical kind of type of guy. So it's interesting to kind of think about that practically too. As a practitioner, you can continue to work with these players through the rehab with your rehab team, even though they might be full go on the court, so to speak. Dana, do you have anything else? Or
Yeah, and
Dr.
I think
Phillips?
I did just post a link to a paper that Keith authored just describing stress relaxation loading, and I think that's definitely something worth reading in terms of understanding the loading. There's a few questions around how many times do you dose for this, and do you dose based on weight? And that's where I don't have a straight up 3-2 3-30-10. I don't have a straight up answer. It's sort of that's sort of I guess the art of the practice where you're understanding the environment, you're understanding the athlete, their nutrition, their weight, their age, their priorities, and then making those decisions based on the evidence you have so far. So I don't really have like a how many times I would dose per day, because there's so many factors in that general question that would influence my recommendations for an athlete. So read that paper, and then it gives you kind of more information around like what you need to think about when you're making those decisions.
Do you ever think, I mean, I'm just trying to think about
Yeah.
the physiology here of tendons, because usually when you think of relative dosing, it usually is supposed to be representative of muscle tissue, and the weight of that muscle tissue. And I don't know if we know how much
There's a
connective
weight.
tissue weighs, and if there's a way to ever get to a relative dose based on body mass. I don't know if we'll ever get there. Does anyone have any Any thoughts if we'll ever get to a relative dosing for it?
My sense, and Keith can correct me here if I'm wrong, is I mean, you still got to get the substrate to the tissue, right? And so just remember, this is a very poorly vascularized tissue. So opening up the capillaries and delivering the substrate to the tissue, I'd err on the side, particularly since it's a lot of non-essential amino acids. So, you know, I mean, it's not that big a deal. And we've gone over, I think Keith's answered it several times about the type of collagen, which I know is scooping one of our later questions. Does it matter? He's saying no. And I agree. I kind of flood the system, to be honest with you. And, you know, there's no overdose issue here. At 30 grams is a lot. And I think that that would be the approach that I would take. I mean, if you're gonna, it may be a situation a little bit like the pool is actually quite small. And so you want to try and get the substrate to the tissue. I would go a higher dose, but you know, some athletes are like, I don't want to take that much collagen, but collagen dissolves into, you know, solutions super easy, a lot easier than whey or anything else like that. So to me, it's actually a bit of a dawdle to try and dissolve 30 grams into a reasonable volume and still make it taste great because it's so bland. It has no real taste at all.
But not substituting it for a high quality full amino acid.
No. Yeah, I mean, you still got to get the
Yeah.
rest of your protein in, right? So if we're, you know, if we can all agree on that, then, you know, maybe 30 grams and 30 grams of whey protein that's a little bit of overkill. But, you know, just remember the timing, it appears to be key here. And one tissue needs it early on because it's not as responsive and it kind of turns off after a while. And the other one is sitting there waiting. It's like a big sponge, right? And it's a sponge for a long time, 24 hours, right? So muscle anabolically set. People who walk around with shakers like wanting to drink their protein, not necessary.
I give them all away.
Yeah, well, you know, it's usually guys who do it. So you know, I don't want to comment on what that says, but there you go.
So
we all know.
I'm gonna kind of move over a little bit into some genres here that maybe some people haven't thought about application of collagen for. And so, you know, we'll kind of move into you know, a very, you know, it's with the new, you know, last year or year and a half ago with the new IOC position stand, REDS is everywhere. There's a whole plethora of new research coming out in this, and especially female athlete research. And so, you know, can we talk a little bit about application? And I also understand, and our practitioners understand that REDS is this like now a panacea of so many things. So, you know, let's talk a little bit about this population and maybe the interplay of collagen and bone, and ways that we could maybe think about application in this population. And Dana, I know you work a lot. You've got a really strong history of working with, you know, high REDS prone, you know, type of athletes and your experience with female cycling. So, you know, and that's also a group prone to maybe bone issues because there's a lot of impact. So maybe if you want to kind of start us off with just a little bit of that practical world.
Yeah, in sort of the higher risk sports, so you know, running, endurance sports, track and field, cycling, between like cycling, the cycling world historically has not had a lot of load on the bone. It's now common practice to also load the bone in other ways, so we're not getting these sort of brittle bones. And I just had a athlete that I used to work with who crashed again, and everything broke as a like veteran Tour Tour de France winner, and just like shattered. Everything breaks really easily. But something we see frequently also in kind of running an endurance sport, a sport that, you know, loads a lot, is sort of like this reoccurrence, you know, stress reactions in red scenarios. And I think that's something where, as a practitioner, really understanding the sort of the art of working with these athletes. And I think, you know, we've answered some of the like bone and connective tissue loading and nutrition stuff, but also looking at, okay, something might not exactly be a priority. We need to convince this person if there's actually a barrier to fueling enough. There's a lot of bigger priorities than focusing on this acute injury or this reoccurrent injury. But when I'm thinking about like how we work with athletes, the psychology around um, nutrition and food and eating, it could be actually an opportunity if you're like, hey, if you kind of take this recipe I made you and you get a lot of nutrition in that shake along with collagen, and you're like, I'm putting a collagen recipe for you. You might actually have some luck in inadvertently increasing energy intake. So thinking about it, using some of the different strategies, not necessarily a priority, but in a sort of inadvertent way to help this athlete recover.
Yeah, I'll just add one thing. I just put in a paper there by Luke Hilkins. And so what Luke did is he actually took elite female cyclists in the Netherlands. He gave them dietary collagen and a jumping exercise, and he saw an increase in bone mass. And so that was really important because, again, collagen is it's the most common protein in the body. And it does seem to be an early target when we go into energy deficiencies, that we do see decreases in collagen synthesis quite readily when we fast an animal or when we give them kind of restricted feed. So it does seem like a collagen supplement is potentially interesting. The other reason that I put this paper in there is if you go into the tables, one of their key findings that nobody really has taken any kind of anything from, and these are elite women, they actually lost more body fat. So they actually were lower body fat at the end. And it's a nice, easy way, as Dana was saying, what you're trying to do is you're trying to say, hey, what you're looking to do is maintain some of these things, and you're trying to lose more body fat by doing this restrictive eating that you're doing. And we understand that there's only a limited amount we're going to be able to do because power to weight ratio is one of the big things that's going to be important in their sport. But if we can at least get them to understand and to get to a point where you can give them something like that does have more. We used to have a professor here who basically he had a student staying with him for a period of time, he and his wife, and he was really, really skinny, and he just started putting suet into everything, like adding a little bit of extra, like it's just butter basically. So he just put butter into everything. So, and the guy added weight and he felt much better about it. And so, okay, you can do some of those things, but really what you're trying to do is you're trying to get them to buy into this idea that, first of all, bone mass isn't going to be the end of the world. That's a conversation for cyclists because Louise Burke has shown beautifully that they will avoid high calcium foods and other things that are going to increase their bone mass. But you can at least get them to not break everything in their body when they fall by maintaining a little bit of bone mass. And you can do that by giving them the kind of the distractor of, oh, look, it decreased body fat. And that's one of those things that a lot of the athletes are going to jump at.
Do you anything to add?
I mean, I think the other piece is what we're seeing now with these non-weight supported athletes is that, as soon as they begin to do their work, is that you begin to see calcium levels go way up, right? So pre-exercise supplementation with calcium or a high dairy food or something like that to offset that. I think Wendy Court I've seen her several times now present and show that we mobilize this calcium. And if you've got a load, you could probably drive some of it back in terms of a mineralization effect. But if you're riding a bike or if you're a long swim or something like that, then actually, you just get rid of the calcium. And that's probably part of the reason why these folks have such poor bone mass, right? I mean, it looks like they're so active, right? And yet the cyclists and the swimmers and the rowers, not great bone mass, to be honest. Rowers not too bad because they do a lot of heavy work as well, but not so much the road cyclists and the long distance swimmers.
So I'm keeping my eye on the time because that's part of my job here. So I'm want to protect a little bit of the fact that, we'd love to have y'all for 2 hours, but I'm also protecting your schedules. So I'm going to kind of just go quickly. I want to do like a 1 minute or 2 minute commentary. The next question was just a little bit about knee and joint changes and osteoarthritis. I'm going to flip past that. Because I do think this is kind of a funny one and maybe is only worth about 2 minutes of our time. But, collagen, from the Gen Pop, I remember just being blown away by people telling me about collagen for their hair, skin, nails. One of my favorite quotes about it was one of my players asking me if it's the same thing that his wife puts in her lips. So let's just talk really quickly around the evidence around this, because we do know that this is the Gen Pop kind of perception of one of the, key ways that collagen can help everybody out in the universe. So any opinion about the research for the vanity aspects around collagen? I'm actually asking for Dana because she does want to use this as anti-aging.
I buy all the creams. I buy one. Yeah, honestly,
See, I'm keeping this clamped though, like quick 1 minute rapid
I
fire.
honestly haven't looked at the research lately, so I have no clue in the skin and hair and nails. I would say anecdotally, that's all I know.
So I can tell you that Luke did a short-term study where he did skin biopsies. There was no effect of collagen supplementation on the skin. But again, that was a 5-hour study. Stu's colleague, Mark Tarnopolsky, did an old school study where he took skin off the butts of people who were big athletes, and it was younger skin than those who were sedentary. Again, it just tells us that loading and exercise is far more effective than the nutritional components, but it's also far harder to get people to do.
I just dropped, I think, a fairly recent meta-analysis on this in the chat, and you can make of it what you will. All I will say is that if you think the supplement industry is unregulated, get into cosmetics and skin aging and everything. All of the measurements that are including, skin elasticity and everything are subjective. You know, I won't argue with Jennifer Aniston's wonderful skin. I think she's probably got a little more going on than collagen, but I'll just say this: I'm when I look at this, and when you look at some of the reviews that do show an effect on skin, aging, wrinkles, this sort of thing, and you really dive inside it and parse it out, 80% of the studies that show positive effects are always industry sponsored. And that again comes back to my sort of jadedness on the whole process. But the one I've got there is, I think, a better done meta-analysis, and you can make of it what you will. But I wish there was something good for skin, because Keith, forget about muscles and tendons. If we found something that was good to take away people's wrinkles, we'd be sitting in Tahiti doing this instead of our offices. So
Just to kind of go back to just what always screams through my head when we talk about skin and skin genetics, genetics, right? And so we did have a question here from one of my colleagues in the NHL, Lisa McDowell, Red Wings dietitian. We faced off last night. It was preseason. They kicked our butt. But she did have a question a little bit around, do we have any information before we go into our rapid fire questions? Maybe this could just be the first one is, do we have any information regarding like genetic predisposition around synthesis of collagen, or how, is there any do we know anything genetically right now in this space? And we are with the caveat of knowing that we're kind of in a wild west with genetic stuff as well.
Absolutely. There's tons of genetics. So George McConey did a couple of really nice studies on tendinopathies, Achilles tendinopathies in population in South Africa, found collagen 2 and a protein called tenacin C, not collagen 2, collagen 5 and tenacin C were associated with tendinopathies. And you can see polymorphisms that make you more or less likely to get injured. There are diseases called hereditary diseases or disorders of connective tissue. There's a variety of them, everything from Marfan's disease to Loeys-Dietz syndrome. So these are really important things. This is probably something that Dana gets exposed to more in the NBA, because the classical definition was that of Marfan's disease was that your reach was at least 2 inches higher, greater than your height. That is pretty much every single person. 90+% of the people in the NBA have a reach that's at least 5 inches longer than their height. So they've had to change the definition, but it is problematic because those connective tissue disorders lead to aortic aneurysms and aortic dissection. And so a lot of people who are really good athletes, really lanky, really good young athletes, will die from cardiovascular failure as a result of that. So it is something that we do take into account. And there are a number of times when I've had people take their athletes in for a little bit of testing, just because they've got a certain injury history. They've contacted me, and I go through a number of things, and it seems clear that they might have this. And the first thing I do is I have them go in and do an echocardiogram, so that we can at least get some sort of ideas to the size of the aorta and make sure that they're not going to have issues that are going to be life-threatening.
Okay, well, that kind of starts off our rapid fire round section here as well. And so again, we can kind of go through these quickly. Anyone can jump in and have a little yes, no, maybe, doesn't matter. So the source, marine versus bovine, doesn't matter. Anyone?
Keith's got a good answer here.
Yeah.
So the only thing that matters is that you don't necessarily get it from the bone of a mammalian organism. So pig or cow skin is totally fine. The bone is less good, because all of us mammals hold our heavy metals in our bones. And so when you do bone broth or other things, it can be very high in lead. The marine sources don't tend to have that. So there's no difference between collagen 1 versus gelatin versus type 2 versus whatever. But you just want to make sure that you're not taking in something that's got a lot of lead or other heavy metals in it.
That might feed into the second one, collagen versus gelatin.
Taste and usability. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's, again, if you have a chef that's doing it, they like to use gelatin because they can do a lot more with it. It's just hard to get a lot of gelatin in, because it's basically a hockey puck if you're gonna do that. And so we'll use a combination, or we'll use collagen.
And bone broth. Can I just use that?
Yeah, I can post a study that Rebecca, what's Rebecca's last name anyway?
Alcock.
Yeah, thank you,
Alcock.
Rebecca Alcock. She did a study that would looked at the amino acid composition and amount in different collagen supplements or sources, as well as casein, and basically showed like a commercial bone broth that was purchased didn't really have a lot of actual protein in it. It wasn't, not really any significant dose.
Tasty.
Yeah,
Tastes great.
right. I do. I like, keeps me warm. So not going to be where you're maybe going to get a high dose.
And
yeah, and
there's
all of our guys that are already over sodiuming with all the extra sodium they're getting from all of our extremely high sodium products. I'm always laughing because I'm like, and there's just some more sodium for all of our guys.
Yeah, and the only other thing is the heavy metal component, because there
Sure,
are a couple of studies
absolutely.
that show that lead levels can be pretty high.
And then one of the questions we did have from the group when we surveyed were like, this is kind of very overarching question, but like, do all collagen supplements kind of work the same? Like, for the most part, the generally available NSF certified collagen peptide supplement variations.
Yeah. I think from an advertising perspective, and what practitioners are seeing is, oh, this is better because it's got type 3 and 5. This is better for your skin. But when you looking at what we look at is like breakdown and digestion, the amino acids are quite similar, and what's going into your gut and then getting absorbed and is very similar regardless of the type of collagen. or collagen source.
Yeah, the only thing that all of these companies say is that they get these small peptides and that the peptides are somehow active. Um, the study that I described before with the recombinant collagen, or that we actually measured a tripeptide but it's at a level that's almost 1,000-fold lower than the glycine or hydroxyproline. But you can measure a peptide, but you don't take that in order to get these peptides. So um, it doesn't, like, Dana can tell you that in one of our studies we had to use a lower dose because the company was so sure that their stuff was so much better, and it showed the exact same dose profile, and we weren't able to make a distinction that we wanted to at the high end because we had to add these lower end levels because they were so convinced that theirs was so much better. And you get a bunch of products that have minimal amounts of collagen because they've worked with a specific supplier of collagen that says their collagen is so great. And it actually just makes the supplement completely useless because by the time you get enough of the supplement in, you've got like this pile of powder and you can barely get it. So you're just looking to get something that is just any collagen will work. And it's going to do a minimal amount. So that's
Don't overthink it.
Yeah, and don't spend a lot of money on it because if it's going to give you like 1% or 0.1 or 0.5%, you don't want to spend. We used to talk about it all the time with the whey protein. Is you put it into milk. Milk is going to give you about 90% of it and of the effect, and the protein, the powder is giving you 90% of the cost. So, like for a lot of these things, you just want to make sure that what you're putting in is you don't go for the
That's
most
the answer
expensive
to the
one.
question, athletes, this is so whey protein or milk, and my answer is, how much money do you have in your pocket? And they're like, $2. I'm like, go get some milk. And then they say $10. I'm like, if you like whey, go for it. But yeah, unless somebody's handing you obviously muscle milk or something like that. But dairy's pretty good. Calories and bang for your buck for $1. It's not bad.
So you guys are obviously welcome to stay on. I want to be really sensitive. I know Stu, especially, you've got back to back,
I'm afraid I
meetings
have to
today.
go. Yeah.
Yeah. If you have time for just an elevator pitch to summarize kind of, we'll get you to go first, Stu, if you can, just some closing remarks. You're in an elevator with Kobe as somebody real, and they say, "Hey, Stu, I saw you on your Instagram. I'm a follower.
Yeah.
What's your pitch? What's your kind of your closing remarks around supplementation and in a general athletic population? Just summarize it all for us."
Yeah, I mean, the questions I go through, the first thing I say is, there are plausible mechanisms that make my biological sense. What's the prior probability of benefit? Is there good human data? Probably in a lot of these scenarios, I think with elite athletes and the, hands-on care that a lot of folks are getting, like they would obviously in the NBA, NFL, NHL, you're getting something that the mere mortals aren't. Load, I think, and just reiterating what Keith said and what I keep saying is that nutrition is the layer of icing on top of what load bakes is the cake, right? So just appreciate that it can do something, but you've got to dial in all of the other things and get them right. And just thinking that, you keep smashing your athletes and then I'm going to throw a bunch of collagen in, that's going to help, and we'll do some vitamin C and it'll all be good, is yeah, hopefully people have walked away realizing that that's not the case. So and don't expect miracles either. Like everything, genetically superior pro athletes probably got a few other things going on that the rest of us don't. Not to mention a great staff around them, but mere mortals like myself. Yeah, I wish I had the answer, but still knees sore, elbows sore, hurts the next day. Collagen took it, no real effect. So, but I'm probably not doing the right loading either. So.
Yeah, we'll get you
Awesome.
next time. Next time we're together, Stu, I'll get you sorted.
Stu,
All right, buddy.
if you have to jump off, thank you so much for coming on. We really appreciate
I'm
your
afraid I
appreciate
do.
time.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's all
but
good.
yeah.
That's all good, brother. Yeah.
Thank
Thank you so
you
much.
so much. Yeah, thanks for giving me the platform. Always a pleasure to chat and appreciate the dialogue.
Awesome.
Good to see you, Stu.
Have fun in the hammer. See ya. Keith, I was just actually in Hamilton this past weekend for a wedding, and I was like,
I'm
wow,
sorry.
they must pay Stu a lot of money to live here for so long.
I think he lives in Ancaster. It's a little nicer.
Okay, yeah, downtown Hamilton. Wow, that's all I gotta say.
Yep.
Yeah, I grew up in Burlington across the bay, so
Ah.
you're not telling me anything I don't know.
I met my husband in Hamilton. We both lived there.
Okay, so Keith, I want to be protective of your time, and Dana and I can kind of stay on a little bit here and maybe answer some practitioner questions. Someone did ask about the citations in there. We will compile them as part of the chat, so no worries. We'll get those out to everybody. But go ahead, Keith.
Yeah, so the biggest thing is the kind of the 2-second pitch is that it is a supportive technology, as we're talking about it with Stu. If you get the loading wrong, doesn't matter. We saw that in the NBA. We've got great nutritionists in the NBA. It doesn't matter how good your nutrition is. If your loading is wrong, you're gonna break down. And so a lot of it is trying to make sure that you know what's happening as far as what they're doing on the field, on the ice, on the court, and in their, not only just in their organized practice, but also what's their extra loading. What are they doing? If you're in the NBA, you're going to have people staying there doing their small jumps for hours. You're going to have lots of people who think that they have to spend more time because this is the culture that we're producing. And that's fine, but we have to say that, look, that's all about building skill or building your heart or building your skeletal muscle. It's not necessarily going to do these connective tissues, your tendons, ligaments, cartilage, and bone. And so there, I think at least getting people to do, say, 2 to 3 sessions a week that are designed to optimize those tissues and fix any problems within those tissues, and then support those with a collagen whey blend 30 to 60 minutes before. It's going to be great. One of Stu and I's colleagues, Graham, oh shit, Graham's going to kill me for forgetting his last. Close. There we go. Close. Yep.
We got each other, Keith. First name, last name.
So Graham's worked with English rugby for years, and he's a nutritionist, and he says one of the first things he does is go in and say, what are the supplements that you're not going to give up? And almost all the rugby guys are like collagen, because they've seen an effect over time. And we see that both, there's good meta-analysis in osteoarthritis. We've seen it in college athletes. There's a Clark study where they show that knee pain goes down. And so there's lots of good evidence that if you take it for a while, you're going to see benefits in these connective tissues that we maybe haven't seen in some of the controlled scientific studies that last 5 hours. That's usually when the feeding is having its effect, but there's a lot of different things when you're building something on the outside than you're building something on the inside. And so that's why we're getting into this period where people are like, oh, going away from it, because they've seen a couple of things that don't show a positive effect. A lot of the stuff that we're doing now, and we've been doing with Luke and other people, what we're seeing is that there's a nice effect there. It's sometimes kind of hidden by other factors, but that there's a nutritional component to it. And especially if we measure a little bit longer, it's easier for us to see. And so it's not going to cure anything, and it's not going to do anything if you don't get the loading right, but it can support the load quite well.
Dana.
Yeah, I think my closing remarks is really kind of understand the physiology and the reason for any of your supplements, but understand why you're using or recommending something, and understand the physiology of the loading, of the training. And I think that's really important to make some of these decisions around whether or not to use a supplement, to use collagen, and if it's a priority at that time, and then when and how much and how around the dosing. I think it's really important for us as practitioners to understand the load, and then build your build your nutrition supplementation based on load and physiology of the sport.
Yeah, I think for me as a practitioner, I think some of the good thing about, and something what we always talk to our attendees when when you're in one of our when you're taking our gut course, or when you come and see us live with the Elite Ops course, is I'm hoping that you felt really uncomfortable with some of the stuff that you heard today, and it was unfamiliar and made you feel like I don't know anything about this. And that feeling is actually, that Jocko guy, like, good. Like, we want you to be curious and understand the nuance and the scope and the depth and the breadth and the application of this type of literature. Because I think too often times you get in, and maybe the message you give your athlete is you need collagen for your tissue health, but you as a practitioner need to know more than just that single line. And I think that's what we want these discussions to be, is to challenge your knowledge, challenge your understanding. And if today you felt like, crap, this is just an area where I just don't know, there's resources. Go read, get educated, start following Keith's lab, and get kind of up to speed on it. And for me as a practitioner, it's kind of like walking away from that, like, supplement table where the collagen's this sitting there, and you don't really the guys just go and self prescribe it, and it's just kind of something that's there, and that happens a lot at the especially large team kind of distribution level. And so understanding the nuance of what your sport's doing, maybe starting to educate yourself, because maybe when they're out of practice, you're inside making smoothies, you're not really actually aware of the training load, of what that athlete's doing in the training room, and kind of trying to get a little bit deeper into that as a practitioner with your knowledge. But then it will also translate into your value on the team, because you are asking questions and being a little bit more deliberate and kind of evidence-based around how you dose or how you prescribe these supplements. So I think for me, what's been really critical as a practitioner is just kind of digging deeper, feeling uncomfortable, and then trying to think about ways this can help to amplify your role within not only the daily training environment, but in that rehab, kind of get them back on the field as fast as possible scenario. So awesome. Well, Keith, I want to respect your time. Do you have time to stay on a little bit for some Q&A, or do you have to go? There's no pressure from
So
us.
I'm happy to answer a couple of questions before I go, but if it's going to, I think it's also good if you guys can talk. I like to leave have time when people feel more free to talk, and sometimes people don't feel as free to ask me questions as they would ask you questions. So I think it's probably better if I step away.
Okay.
Dana knows a lot of the stuff and can kind of help with any of the more complex things.
Okay. Well, we really welcome you, and we're really appreciative of your time. We know how precious it is. So thank you so much for your expertise. And we also want to try to amplify you and your work in our world, because we just want to make sure that the right people doing the right research get their time in the sun.
Thank you.
And so
Thank you for having me.
yeah, we're really excited to have you on, and we appreciate your participation. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank
You guys
you.
have a good one.
See you soon. All right.
Awesome. It looks like Stu's like recorder is probably still on. So.
Oh, funny. Okay. I'm just gonna open up the chat here and unmute people. It might take me a minute to do that. Jen, if you want to, I think probably like a chunk of people will have to go for sure. But if you want to grab some of the questions
Yeah.
in the chat, Ashley's raised a hand, and I'm just gonna do this unmute thing.
Okay. You tell us when things are ready. I mean, I've been trying to kind of keep up.
Yeah.
There was definitely some questions around. So this is an interesting one. So, and it kind of has a context for even just general wound healing. So what about collagen supplements for skin injuries like wounds or burns, Dana?
Yeah, I would look at, I mean, obviously the degree of the injury, if it's just, a little bit of stitches, I probably wouldn't make a whole collagen protocol around that. But yeah, it's connective based tissue. Even though like the skin, the study Keith was talking about, they took a fraction of the skin, like they took the whole biopsy and they actually looked at collagen synthesis in the skin. Even though that didn't show anything, it was still a short time period. But then if you're looking at that sort of high stress increase in amino acids and increase in need for the amino acids in that connective tissue, yeah, absolutely, I would increase or add collagen for like a surgery, a burn, a wound. Um, yeah, even though, because you're not necessarily just looking at the dermis layer for some of those injuries, like it's actually much deeper. And with burn wounds, from what I understand, there's, I mean, they're, there's in the burn wound space, there's a body of research looking at putting like meshes onto the tissue. So they're looking at different collagen meshes, basically. So part of that looking at, okay, if we're adding, you know, collagen mesh on top of your burn wound, your tissue injury is much deeper. And then they've also looked at, you know, how those collagen meshes are made and what's in them essentially. So in that space, I would sort of go down the understanding how severe is the injury. I think in a lot of more severe skin injuries or burn wounds, it makes sense from a increased need and a nutritional perspective.
So just in that perspective, you know, like something like Juven, you know, in the burn space, and I know we're talking a little bit clinically here now, a little bit, but you know, Juven also has a lot of glutamine in it. And so what we do know is that, you know, some of those single amino acids, like Juven's essentially like almost like a BCAA with some high levels of glutamine, that there is a role for glutamine, especially in wound care and burn care. So I don't know if Juven, as of late, I haven't used it for a few years now, actually has added collagen to it. But it's kind of targeting a little bit more of like a single amino acid approach and a high dose glutamine usually in that product. Someone was just asking about glutamine. Ashley had a great question around you know, changing the dose during high heavy metal exposure. And I'm not going to call out Ashley here, but I know she does work in the military population. And I know sometimes they have to be cognizant of their heavy metal exposure because they are dealing with a lot of equipment operation that may make them predisposed to that. So when we were talking a little bit about that lead exposure, Dana, was that just more so towards like if you were using something like a bone broth or kind of a more whole bone type product because of the heavy metals in the bone?
Yeah, just that's where it accumulates. Um, yeah, and I haven't actually seen any studies that have measured like a group taking a bunch of bone broth for their lifetime versus not. But so it's more kind of based on what we know and measured in some of the tissues, not necessarily ingestion into the body. But yeah, it makes sense. I think there's a I could be biased, but I feel like there's a sense around bovine versus marine that marine is better. And I kind of have that bias and I don't even know why. I just like fish and I don't like red meat. But there's the amino acids and the heavy metal levels in the collagen and the amino acids you're getting really depends on where the company is getting the collagen from the animal. So yeah, as Keith mentioned, like kind of the skin and the sinewy pieces versus bone.
So if I'm taking just a regular run-of-the-mill collagen peptide product that's just from one of the main companies,
They should test for
it's pretty low. I'm assuming even just to get it on the shelf, you're not going to be
Mhm.
really exposing people to
Yeah,
a
they should test. I think it's part of like the GMP and the NSF certifications and just some of the um, the GRAS certifications that yeah, they have to test for heavy metals anyways.
So a really practical question, if collagen itself comes from animal sources, is there any effective vegan alternatives or supplements that can support collagen production?
Yeah, there's so it's more in the research stage, and I'm not sure if it's at the point where there's a product that's been researched in a study, but there is a group that has generated collagen from bacteria. So so it's vegan. Whether or not, and we started working on this study, but it was during COVID, and I don't think it got finished. But looking at the byproduct in a study and comparing that to a collagen peptide or hydrolyzed collagen. I don't believe that's been done yet. So that would be the kind of only vegan option. And I know there is a product, and I have to check what it's called again. I can put it in the chat. There is a vegan product on the market. I just don't know if it works exactly the same. But if I'm looking at the study that Keith talked about with the like basically making amino acids, putting them together and making collagen, and the collagen supplement, I don't really see a reason why, if this vegan sourced, this kind of bacterial grown collagen, I don't see a reason why it wouldn't work the same if it's had the amino acids analyzed and the profile is the same. So I'll put that link to that company in the chat, but I don't know any research that's looked at the efficacy.
So again, another question a little bit about groin injury. So this is what we're all dealing with right now in our hockey world. I know our injury report is the same, groin and hip soreness and strains, and the comment was, a groin is made of, ligaments, tendons, nerves, lymph, anything around that particular type of injury or that type of injury prone area in terms of collagen?
Yeah, I mean, it's similar to like the loading piece. I think there's only so much control you can have over the load. Um, as a dietitian, I would not want to be blamed for not doing everything I could to help connective tissue health. So in my world where, we have a really robust sort of performance staff and really robust systems, I would, lean, even though there's not like particular groin injury um, studies, but it is a connective tissue. There is inflammation, there is damage. If there is a rehab process or a loading happening with that athlete to help reduce the sort of flare-ups, or it's being addressed, I don't see a reason why I would not add the nutrition component. I don't think it's going to do magic, but also thinking from the reality of our environment, if you're have an athlete with a continual connective tissue injury, I just wouldn't, I'm not saying do it because of that, but just evaluate kind of your scenario and your staff, and you don't want to be thrown under the bus. But if you can, comfortably rationalize, I give them enough protein, whey protein, and they have lots of protein-based foods, and they're getting a ton of glycine from this, they don't need collagen, that's totally viable too. I think just thinking about the realities of our jobs too.
Yeah, and just kind of looking through the chat here, we'll just kind of wrap things up here. I think as practitioners, we always just kind of want to have like, what I say, what's my prescription, and is it 60 minutes, collagen plus whey plus vitamin C, make sure it's 60 minutes pre, understanding my load characteristics. And we kind of just want to like have the box. And if you guys follow us on IG, and we need some more followers, so go ahead and give us a follow in exchange for this free, amazing webinar. But some of
do our social media.
if you follow us on IG already, thank you for doing so. You'll notice we did a true and false, and we had a lot of internal debate about how to do a true and false question, because the answer was yes, no, and sometimes maybe. And so I think part of this is, and I hate as a person who loves to be black and white, I hate to be like, as we end this, here's the marching orders for you. But I think what I'm hoping as practitioners, what we want to do through these discussions and things like our courses and the gut course is expand your mind to get to the point where you kind of start to go yes, no, and sometimes maybe. And if you're in a team environment where you have a really tight budget and you're looking at the way your athletes are being trained, and it's kind of leaning towards what Keith was describing as like just a lot of load and maybe not a lot of effective time for a supplement to work, you might look at that environment and be like, I have a really limited budget right now. So maybe I can't invest in this. Maybe it's just not applicable for me, or maybe I'll buy some and save it for when I have an injury situation, and have it there. And so I think it's important for us to kind of understand context and start to make informed decisions based on that kind of case by case scenario. Because something I'm taking away from this talk as well is that depending on my training environment, you may not have a really well established kind of like tendon loading care program for your guys, and maybe because it isn't such a high risk, like Achilles risk, situation like the MBA. And so trying to kind of understand and chat through those nuances with your training staff is important. But you may have some lower hanging fruit with maybe athletes that have tendinopathy or just things where you're just kind of understanding the physiology of that a little bit more. And then like to Stu's point, there's not a lot of circulation in there. So throw it, there's no harm necessarily to go higher dose. So, maybe just go a little bit more robust. In the end of the day, we don't have any ability to do a 1 + 1 = 2. We're not doing biopsies. We're not even able to like say, this is the collagen yes or no button, so kind of making those informed decisions. But as we discussed beforehand, just not just like blank shots. We were just like, all right, everybody gets collagen and we're all good. So Dana, is there anything else to add there? I think that's kind of what we're hoping to get out of this, and what we want to do is to grow you as practitioners, is to get you to that point. And then what Dana and I have both also noticed, as you get seasoned as a practitioner, just like Stu, you start to understand that you, although you want to believe the miracle claims, you realize that in the global context of your athlete, their freak genetics, the sport, the load, the kind of survival of the fittest that they've already gotten to at point in their physiology and genetics, that a lot of this stuff is that icing on the cake. And so as practitioners, we also tend to, as we season and get more nuanced and understanding of literature, we pull the reins back a lot more as you start to get deeper knowledge in some of these areas. Is that fair, Dana?
Yeah, the sprinkles on the icing on the cake. That's Louise
Yeah.
famous line of role of supplements.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's awesome. Hey guys, we will have this recording available. So typically the way we do it is we'll send it out to everybody who registered as a recording. And then we'll probably also potentially make this available as a recording on the website to access as well. So we appreciate everybody for calling in. Those of you, the 73 that hung in the whole 2 hours, you are our people. If you haven't come to the IMG, to one of our courses yet, you'll love it because we go hard for 3 days. And we just hope that in the future we can bring expert panels like this together to discuss some of the nuances. And thanks everybody. Thanks Dana, and we'll be hopefully in touch with you on socials or live events. All right, awesome. Do you want to close it out, Dana?
Yep.
Turn it off.
Oh.
I'm really bad at like ta-da.
No, you're perfect. We'll close it off.
Okay.
Thanks for coming. We'll
Thanks, guys.
see you at IMG, hopefully.
Yeah. All right.